After running cold for a while, I'm dealt ace-5 suited in the cutoff. Under the gun straddles for 10, I raise to 35. The under the gun player defends his straddle. This is the same opponent that I faced in the previous hand. We're heads up. The flop comes queen 6-3 with 2 spades. Good flop, we've got a flush draw, 1 over, and a backdoor straight draw. Under the gun checks, I bet 35 again. The player calls, the turn is the king of spades, we've got the nuts. Under the gun checks, I'm looking to build this pot. I bet 105, targeting hands that are towards the top of my opponent's range, like king, queen, or smaller flushes. Lots of hands that the under the gun player might have called a flop bet with, like pocket 7s, 8s, or 9s, are gonna have a hard time calling a bet no matter what. He's not gonna have many top pair holdings in this range either. The player folds, we win it. Here I've got ace-5 of diamonds in the cutoff, 3 players limping ahead of me. I call, small blind calls, and the big blind checks. We go 6 ways to the flop. That's a lot. One of the big differences between this game and 3-5 is that there are way more multi-way pots. The flop comes 9-9-5 with 2 hearts and 1 diamond. The small blind and big blind both check. Under the gun bets 10. Under the gun +1 and the hijack fold. I call 1 time for your mind, 1 time. Any ace, 5, or diamond would be great. The small blind and big blind fold. We're heads up. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. We like that one because it gives us a flush draw. Under the gun bets 15. I make the call. The river is the 8 of diamonds. We have the nut flush. Under the gun reaches for chips and bets 30. He's my best friend right now. I'm certainly going to be raising. People tend to call lighter in smaller games, so I like to size up. I slide in 130. Should be able to get called by any smaller flush, trip 9s, and 7-6. I think trip 9s is the most likely hand that I'll be up against. The opponent folds pretty quickly. I don't think he had much. Later, I'd see him bet in all kinds of weird spots with weak holdings. We take down a nice little pot. Later, we're dealt ace-5 suited under the gun. I open to 30. The player in middle position 3 bets to 120. He's the nemesis from the hand when I 4-bet pre-flop, then jammed river with pocket kings. I have no idea what he had in that hand, but shortly after, he made it sound as if he didn't have much. He's also the player who I paid off on the river with queen-jack when he had the straight. We're both extremely deep. I'm up 2,000 on the night. I've gotten a huge chunk of the downswing money back this session already. I could approach this conservatively with a call or even a fold. I got fancy 5-betting ace-6 suited in the last vlog and got stacked. There's no real shame in finding a better spot or locking up a win, but with his raise, I just decide, I don't care about the money. I'm just gonna outplay the guy. I'm just gonna outplay the guy this hand. I re-raise. I make it 400. Play right back at him. The opponent's thinking about his decision. Unfortunately, he doesn't fold and ask if I had it. He calls, we're heads up, out of position in a 4-bet pot, and we both have well over 3,000 in front of us. The flop comes 10-9-4 rainbow. We've got nothing. Rags, if you will. The only thing keeping me from giving up is my over and backdoor draws. I make it 450 to potentially get folds out of ace-king and ace-queen hands with no backdoor flush draws. Even jacks and queens aren't going to love facing this bet. The player once again thinks for a while, then he calls. I'm going to need some help. The dealer puts out the jack of clubs, which is a very tricky card since we pick up the nut flush draw, but the opponent could have improved to a set of jacks. Also, if he has a hand like queens or ace-queen, it'll be tough to bluff him off those holdings. There's 1,700 in the pot. The player has 2,350 in his stack, and I have him slightly covered. Me from a year or two ago probably would have never 4-bet ace-5 suited from under the gun pre-flop and wouldn't have ever gotten himself into this tough situation. Even if he did, he'd probably check or bet on the smaller side here, afraid that he's up against the nuts. That guy's okay. I wouldn't invite him to my birthday or anything though, but after getting more experience in the higher stakes games and getting coaching from Nick Petrangelo, one of the absolute best players in the world, I feel like a different person. When a new me looks down, he sees that he has a much bigger heart.
It's always you and me, man.
I didn't get snap called, so once again, I'm not up against a 2-pair better hand. I may be up against kings or queens, maybe something else. It's going to be very tough for him to call with 1 pair, even if he has an open-ended straight draw to go with it. Every time I've shoved for a large amount against him in the past, I've been strong. I did it with trips in the other session, then an overpair earlier in this session. This is pretty much the only hand that I bluff shove with here. Because of that, I definitely would have to balance it out by shoving turn with aces or kings for value. I'm patiently waiting to find out if I'm going to get this bluff through to be up almost 3,000 on the session, or maybe I'll get called and I'll get lucky to win. Of course, what's more likely if I get called is that I'll pretty much lose everything, and I'll be even deeper in the downswing than before I started the session, playing with very little confidence going forward. After a minute and a half goes by, the opponent makes an irreversible decision.
Alright. Let's go twice.
Most of the time, when I'm asked if I want to run it once or twice, I just run it once. In a pot nearly $7,000 at 5 in the morning with a hand that's almost for sure not the best, after battling all night and trying to string some wins together to get out of a downswing, twice seems fine. The first river is the 6 of spades. It hurts like a punch to the gut. The only thing I have left is a small chance to at best win half the pot. In an instant, I could lose all the money that I've won up to this point in the session unless we see a black clover on the second run out. If you've made it this far, hit the like button on the count of 3 for some extra run good. We're gonna need it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. The deuce of clubs comes out. We make the absolute nuts at the buzzer. I'm glad we switched it up to run it twice this time in order to be guaranteed half the pot. You know how I said in the prior episode that I never make backdoor draws? Well, sometimes I do. It just takes 2 attempts at it. That was one of the most stressful hands that I've ever played, especially just to chop up $15 of blinds. The opponent is a little bit shocked to see what I have, then eventually shows that he made a very difficult but correct call with pocket queens. We put maximum pressure on him, but you've got to give him credit for sticking in there with really just a bluff catcher. We needed help to hit one of 12 outs, and we got it.
I'm not so bad in the twice department. That's it.
Nice.
Despite not even winning the pot outright, it's one of my favorite hands that I've ever played. I'd send the details to Nick, who says that I played it perfectly, and that made me feel pretty good. During a coaching session, we talk about this one in depth, going through what my range should look like, what my opponent's range will look like, what I do in slightly different situations, and we ran it through a solver which confirmed that I should have played it the exact way that I did, while the opponent should have also played it the exact way that he did. My coaching session with Nick was filmed and will be part of an upswing course along with other hand histories of mine and comprehensive strategy concepts, which will be released in the next few weeks. We'll talk about that in future episodes though. I've still got poker to play. Just 3 minutes later, we're down ace-5 suited under the gun. I raise to 30, the hijack calls, the button 3-bets to 120. He's an aggressive player. I've got a hand that I can very reasonably 4-bet with, but I just did it a second ago. It seems weird if I 4-bet again. I'm not sure that I'll get credit for having a monster hand, especially since I 3-bet earlier with 10-9 over the same opponent's opening raise, and that hand was shown down. I don't want to fold either. I call since my hand plays decently well. The hijack also calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. The dealer puts out King Jack 8 with 2 hearts. We've got the nut flush draw, 1 over, and a backdoor straight draw. I check. The hijack checks. The button also checks. We're going to get to see a free card. The turn is the 9 of clubs. It's no help to us. Our opponents don't know that though. I bet 300 is a semi-bluff to represent a set of jacks, 9s, or 8s, and ace-king. I'm mostly concerned about getting through the hijack since he could have most of those hands in his range as well. I'm not too concerned about the button because he probably would have bet flop with top pair or better. The hijack takes his last gander at his cards before folding. I only have to get through one more opponent. The button is taking a much longer time to consider what he should do. If he calls, I'm planning to bomb a ton of river cards, whether they're the shape of the box that Kurt Cobain has been locked in or not. Okay, this joke is slightly dated since I'm pretty sure that he's locked in a different shaped box now. After 45 seconds of sweating, the opponent folds. We get another big bluff through in a short span. I've been in so few spots where I could bet for value today. It was a grind getting through the session, but I'm fortunate that some of my moves worked out in order to escape with a small loss rather than a big one. I'm stuck 2,400 when I make it to the main game and pick up ace-5 suited in the big blind. Under the gun +1 limps in. The hijack raises to 40. I call for 30 more. Under the gun +1 folds. We're heads up, out of position. Flop comes King 7-3 with 2 clubs. We've got the nut flush draw with 1 over and a backdoor straight draw. I check to the pre-flop raiser. He reaches for chips, then bets 60. I won't be getting flush over flush to this hand. I call. I just want a club, like the entire cast of Jersey Shore. We get the 8 of spades, no club. The situation is sad. I check. The hijack is being a bully. He bets 140. We have a lot of outs, including possibly an ace. I call. Come on, let us get there one time for DJ Pauly D. No club for him either. It's the ace of diamonds. We make top pair. Our hand has a lot of showdown value. I check. The hijack is considering whether or not he wants to bet. He would mostly be repping ace-king or better. He wants to get a count. I make it so my chips are clearly visible. I don't feel great about calling a large bet. Ultimately, the opponent doesn't pull the trigger. He checks back. That's good news. I happily show our top pair. It's a winner. The fact that the hijack was considering betting the river and the way that he checked makes me believe that we were ahead the whole time. Maybe he had something like a smaller club or spade draw. For a couple orbits in, we're dealt ace-5 suited under the gun +1. I opened to 40. The player on my left calls. The cutoff 3-bets to 130. It's a small sizing. I call for 90 more. The middle position player is getting a great price. He calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It's 5-4-3 with 2 diamonds. We have top pair, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw. It's not the worst. I check. The middle position player checks. The cutoff checks as well. He doesn't have much behind. You'd think he'd just jam with an overpair if he had one. I could very well have the best hand. The turn is the 4 of hearts. It shouldn't have changed anything. I bet 200 for protection against overcards. I'm most concerned about the middle position player possibly having some kind of medium pocket pair. Luckily he folds. The action's on the cutoff. Surprisingly, he goes all in for about 360 total. I'm not sure what to make of this. I call for 160 more. If he has me beat, I'll hopefully have some outs. We agree to run it once. The river is the jack of hearts. Hard to imagine that we have the winner. Yet somehow we do. The opponent turns over ace-king of spades. He didn't want to give up on it. We win a larger than average size pot with a lesser than average strength hand. Those definitely feel good. Ace-5 suited under the gun +1 in a straddle pot and raised to 50. Spraggy's in the cutoff with what I imagine is garbage. He 3-bets to 160. We're not going anywhere. We can mix in 4-betting or calling with ace-5 suited in this situation. If we can make a big hand, there's a big chance that Spraggy's going to blast off because he can't help himself. We're playing deep, and we're playing for keeps.
Call.
Very cool.
We're heads up out of position in a 3-bet pot against the heir to Hell's Kitchen. The flop comes ace-4 deuce rainbow. We've got top pair, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw. Pretty good overall. I'm going to check. Spraggy decides this is a good time to disrespect half the country.
The American male ego is on arrival, by the way. 20 pounds.
That's a small bet. I imagine we'll see a larger sizing in the future either as a bluff or for value. Our hand doesn't really need protection since we have a draw ourselves. We could be way ahead of something like pocket queens. I call to keep Spraggy's worst hands in and to keep the pot more manageable in the instances when we're behind. The turn is the queen of diamonds. It's not ideal because pocket queens takes a lead against us. I check. Spraggy can't exactly fire at will here because we could easily have pocket queens or ace queen ourselves. The opponent checks back, which makes me feel much better about our top pair. Spraggy wouldn't give us a free card if he had a set or 2 pair. The river is the 10 of spades. It's another not so great card. We could be up against pocket 10s or ace 10 suited. I check. There's no quick check back from Spraggy this time. He knows I probably won't have a set or 2 pair either. After check calling a tiny flop bet, it was really just a check back, then checking 2 additional times. To be honest, I'm content to get to showdown cheaply with top pair and essentially no kicker in a 3-bet pot. Spraggy isn't going to let us off the hook easy. He bets 520. It's well over a pot-sized bet. The interesting thing is that Spraggy likely doesn't expect us to have an ace with our line. We would have 4-bet ace-king, and we would have bet river with 2-pair hands like ace-queen, ace-10, and ace-4 suited. Here's a look at our pre-flop 3-bet calling range based on a chart from the new upswing course Smash Live Cash that I have a link for down in the description box. We see that really the only hands containing an ace that we'll have that don't make 2-pair or better is occasionally ace-king offsuit, ace-jack suited, some ace-9 suited, a sliver of ace-8 suited, and a good chunk of ace-5 suited. There really aren't that many top pair hands that will play this way. In comparison, there are a lot of hands like pocket jacks down to 5s will play this way that aren't that strong at all that Spraggy could be targeting in the off chance that he has air. I try to get a little more information from him.
Do you have anything now?
Price is the price, and the price is right.
Well, that's something you can say that doesn't mean anything. Luckily, Spraggy gives us some advice on what to do as he points to the ace.
If you've one of these, you probably have to call.
We both know I won't have one of those very often, and Spraggy sounded a little sad while talking about the scenario in which we do have an ace. If he had king-jack for the straight, he probably would have fired again on the turn as a semi-bluff, so I somewhat ruled that hand out. The main hand Spraggy is representing are ace-10 suited and pocket 10s. We have removal for one of those combinations, and he won't always 3-bet them anyway, so it's just really unlikely that we're beating this spot. If we are, that's unfortunate. We make the call. Spraggy isn't happy to see it. He knows that the camera's on him and loves the spotlight, so he takes his sweet time to show us. There's a very good chance that we're getting slow rolled, particularly as he shows us the 4 of clubs first. I let him know that a pair of 4s is no good, but I'm absolutely not showing our cards until I know that we've got the winner. Spraggy takes my word that we've got him beat and mucks. At this point, it's safe to reveal that we called him on the lighter side. Spraggy must have had 5-4 suited. He gets punished for 3-betting us light. A big one goes our way. We're up about 3,300 total. Things are just getting started as 3 players limp in for 50. We're in the straddle with ace-5 suited. We could check. Instead, I raised to 400 to punish these guys that have tried to see a cheap flop. Wonder Elf calls for a large portion of his stack. Robin folds. T1000 calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop with the best hand. The dealer puts out Queen 9-4 rainbow. We've got 1 over with backdoor draws, but it's still currently best. Small blind checks. I don't have to bet much to deny equity from worse hands that are live. I bet 300. It's less than 1/4 pot. The cutoff folds. The small blind has a gutter and backdoor clubs. He's tired of me pushing people around. It's time for him to make a move. He check raises to 1,200. Well, that shuts things down for us. We've got air. But when we stop to think about what the opponent might be check raising us with, it seemed a little fishy. If he had queens or nines, he would have raised pre-flop rather than limp call or raise. He might have even raised pre-flop with pocket 4s. He's mostly just repping queen 9 or queen 4. That's not that many hands. Even if he had a set or 2 pair, he may just call the flop bet and wait until the turn to check raise like most humans would. I guess he's not really one of those though. I suspect that we're up against some type of bluff by either a straight draw or bottom pair with a backdoor flush draw. If I actually had a really strong hand, I wouldn't re-raise right now. I just flat check raises with hands like queens and nines, so I can't credibly make a move at this point. I call the 1,200, which should look terrifying to the opponent. In the rare instances that we're up against a real hand that check raised us for value, there are a number of cards that will help us improve on the next street, but if we happen to see an opening, we can turn our hand into a bluff and take this pot down with next to nothing. The turn is the 10 of hearts. King Jack gets there, but that's another hand that probably would have raised pre-flop, so I can mostly rule out the opponent having the nuts. Small blind pumps the brakes and checks. I suspect that he's worried that we either had a monster on the flop, or we turned a monster while he doesn't have much. He would have continued firing with 2 pair or better. We're losing to some of the hands that the opponent might have bluffed with, so we need to try to fold those out. I bet 1,700. The opponent snap folds with the best hand after improving to second pair and a gut shot straight draw because our line of betting small on the flop and just flatting the check raise looked so strong that it wasn't worth it for the opponent to put any additional money in the pot.
Tension that works. Honestly, incredible play by Woody there.
We take a creative line that wins us a couple thousand more. Nearly every play we've made has worked out. It's a lot of fun playing when you start stringing moves like this together, and I haven't even made any super strong hands that I'm able to take people to Value Town with.